Give the king thy judgments, O God, thy righteousness. Unto the king's son, he shall judge thy people with righteousness, and thy poor with judgment.
Welcome to Positive Readings. Today I will look at the work of Isaac Bashevis Singer. Singer was a Polish-American writer. He was a Jewish writer, and he wrote in Yiddish. His characters are almost exclusively Jewish, but his dilemmas, the themes of his work, the problems, the conflicts that his characters face, these are really universal. He's probably most well-known novel is The Slave, which is set in the 17th century in Poland and deals with some historic massacre of the time. But also other works like Enemies, a love story, which is about a Holocaust survivor, and like many of Singer's stories, an entanglement, a love triangle of sorts. But this character is trying to get by in the post-Holocaust world, and also the novel Shosha, which is probably one of Singer's more autobiographical novels, set on a small street in Poland, in Warsaw, called Krochmana, which is a story that, or a street, I should say, that Singer writes about fondly. While he's written a lot of novels, he's probably most famous for his short stories, and this is actually, the short stories are the ones that Harold Bloom highlights as kind of his Singer's great work. After reading through a lot of these stories, I would say that I probably agree. There's, to a certain extent, the stories do hold up a little bit better than the novels, but definitely the novels are worth reading, so I highly recommend them. Reading through these stories, I've seen that the settings are very important, and I think these stories can be categorized into two types of stories: the shtetl story, which are set in Poland in these small villages, these small shetls, and the exile stories, which deal with the Jewish exiles, the Jewish diaspora, mainly in New York, but also in Miami as well. And of course, you'll see within the same story, these characters might travel to places like Israel, Tel Aviv. The pattern that exists in all of these stories is that the characters, again, Jewish characters, they're transgression, they're sinning, and through this act of transgression, again, usually against the religious norms of the community, they come to enlightenment. This is a subversive message. It seems to be implying that in order to become enlightened, one has to sin, one has to go through the process of doing wrong and doing bad in order to come to the good. This interpretation is also highlighted in a critic or writer on Singer stories, a writer named Spilka, who refers to this process as the backdoor policy to God, or the backdoor route to God. And that's, again, characteristic of many of Singer's characters. As I said, setting is extremely important in these stories, and it's important because the setting seems to give an explanation to the sin. Why is the sin happening? For instance, in the shtetl stories, the sinner is usually enticed by imps, devils, kind of the supernatural. So we see this throughout these stories. The characters are almost magical, realistically dealing with the supernatural. In the exile stories, the characters' sin is more about following their own desires and without getting enticed by devils. but often trying to make sense of a world that appears to be meaningless, again, post-Holocaust. I'll focus on two stories that illustrate these categories and also the pattern of transgression into enlightenment. One of these stories is The Unseen. The other is The Cabalist of East Broadway. The Unseen is a shtetl story. This story is about this character named Reb Nathan and his wife Rosie. They're old. They live well. They have no children. One day their maid dies. They get a new one. The new maid is this young woman from the city, and she entices Reb Nathan to run off with her, divorce his wife. And then she runs off with his money. He ends up coming back broke. Rosie, during this time, has remarried. Yet despite this, she takes Nathan in and brings him into this little cottage on her property, and which is obviously a sin on her behalf within this Jewish community. And she tries to take care of him. Eventually she dies, and he dies as well. The story is narrated by the devil, called the evil one, the evil spirit at the beginning, sometimes called the destroyer. And in line with the theme of transgression to enlightenment, this kind of these contradicting forces, we also see that with the devil himself. The devil's often using Jewish law or things that we would normally associate with the good to entice the characters to do bad. One example we can see here, when Reb Nathan was trying to decide if he should leave his wife, the devil tells him, "Know ye, Nathan, you are fated to have sons and daughters, and according to law you should have divorced Rosie Turmel 10 years after marrying her. Well, you may not leave the world without begetting children, and heaven therefore has sent you Shifra Zurel," that's the new maid, "to lie in your lap and become pregnant and bear healthy children, who after your death will say Kaddish for you and will inherit your possessions. Therefore do not try to resist, Nathan, for such is the decree of heaven. And if you do not execute it, you will be punished. You will die soon, and Rosie Turmel will be a widow anyway, and you will inherit hell." So you can see here this prescription to have children is being used as a justification for Reb Nathan to leave his wife, when really he's just deluding himself, because obviously he's being driven by lust at this point. We see this again just a few pages later when Reb Nathan comes back and Rosie takes him in, which again is a sin, but the devil tangles them up, and he does this in an interesting way. Right here, I'll just read this passage. "Well, I, the destroyer, had not yet tried all my insidious tricks. The scale of sins and punishment was not yet balanced. Therefore, in a vigorous move, I spoke to the woman, Rosie, in the language of compassion, for it is known that compassion, like any other sentiment, can serve evil as well as good purposes." So, and I think that's a really important part of this story, this idea that compassion, what we normally look at as like the highest good, can often also be used to serve the evil, the bad. And this leads us to this kind of strange ending we get, where after Rosie has died, Nathan is dying, and he has a vision of this two-headed woman. It's both Rosie and Shifra together, two-headed, two breasts. And when Nathan sees them, right before he dies, he exclaims, "The truth is twofold," Nathan exclaimed. "This is the mystery of all mysteries." So this idea that there isn't one way, there isn't good and bad, sin and virtue, but rather these things are mixed, and life in part is wrestling with these two things. This theme of transgression to enlightenment is depicted in a different way, without demons, without the evil one, in this very short story called Cabalist of East Broadway. This is a exile story, and like many of Singer's exile stories, it's more autobiographical than the Shettle stories. So we have a narrator who's very much just like Singer himself. It's a expat, exiled Jewish writer living in New York, spends a lot of time in these cafeterias where there are other exiled Eastern European Jews who are just hanging out there, kind of talking. They're all artists, writers of some sort. And in this setting, this character Joel Yablana is seen. He is sort of a scholar, but kind of poor. He's got bad teeth. He doesn't want to fix his teeth. At one point, he says, kind of give us his humorous perspective. He says, "There's only one step from false teeth to a false brain." So he's just kind of a willing sufferer, and everyone wonders why he doesn't leave this kind of poverty that he's living in, because again, he's supposed to be this great scholar, this Hebrew scholar. Why doesn't he leave this poverty and go to Tel Aviv, go to Israel? These different organizations are offering to bring him there, but for some reason he doesn't. He has no desire to. Then we have a break, and this second part is set in Tel Aviv. This is years later. The narrator just walking into a hotel, happens to hear Yablana's voice, goes in, sees Yablana giving a presentation. Afterwards, he attends a banquet. They have a talk with each other, and this little interaction here. So the narrator said, "After the banquet, I went over to Yablana and said, 'Often, when I saw you sitting all alone in the cafeteria, I was tempted to ask you why you didn't go to Israel. What was your reason for waiting so long?' He paused, closing his eyes as if the question required pondering, and finally shrugged his shoulders. 'Man does not live according to reason.'" So again, sort of a humorous line here, but this line's important because it comes up again. Right after that, we get another text break, another jump in time, and this is some years later. The writer, Singer, finds himself in the same cafeteria. It's changed. They're not speaking Yiddish. It's more Spanish now. But there he sees Yablana, and Yablana doesn't really want to talk to him. He went from looking old originally in the cafeteria to looking like younger and more vigorous, and his teeth were fixed when he was in Tel Aviv, and now he's back to looking disheveled and in poor health. And they don't have a talk, no interaction, and then we get this, our last paragraph. "A few weeks later, I read among the obituaries that Joel Yablana had died. He was buried somewhere in Brooklyn. That night, I lay awake until 3 o'clock thinking about him. Why did he return? Had he not atoned enough for the sins of his youth? Had his return to East Broadway some explanation in the lure of the Kabbalah? Had some holy sparks strayed from the world of emanation into the evil host? And could they have been found and brought back to their sacred origin only in this cafeteria? Another idea came into my head. Perhaps he wanted to lie near that teacher with whom he exchanged eyeglasses. I remembered the last words I heard from him. Man does not live according to reason." There's a reference there, the kind of a nice little detail for a very short story, this one love, a moment of love that Yablana had, which was he switched glasses with another woman. Again, that doesn't really turn into anything here. But as I read this story, it dawned on me that in part this story is a history of the disillusionment of Zionism. Yablana should be finding everything he wants to find, all happiness, a good life in the newly founded country of Israel, but he doesn't. He doesn't live by reason alone. There's something about the poverty of the cafeteria and this exiled life that brings him back. There's something attractive there. So like Reb Nathan, he's left at the end in not a great state. He went and tried to get something that he thought he would enjoy, and it wasn't what he thought it was going to be. And now he's back with this new kind of, I guess in this case, less optimistic. The knowledge he gained from this was man does not live by reason. There's other things, other emotions that pull us to where we go. Both stories, like many of the stories found in Singer's collection, really emphasizes the individual, whether a religious individual or not, whether within the structures of religion or trying to get out of them, but really about the individual finding his way in a world of exile, or even finding his way within a religious community, which often can be depicted in equally negative ways as the non-religious community. So for that, I find Singer to be an interesting writer, one that appreciates the individual, one that cheers the individual on. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe.
With judgment